Have you ever wondered how many times you have left your soul in silence, waiting for something outside to change what can only be transformed inside? Sometimes, waiting seems like a safe place, a shelter where we hide from the possibility of failure, of being rejected, of not being ready. And we call this prudence. We tell ourselves that it is not time yet, that there is a sign missing, a preparation, a certainty. But behind this apparent calm, there is a cycle of self-sabotage so subtle, so deeply rooted that we no longer recognize it as fear, but as logic. The problem is that this logic does not free us. It imprisons us, because the human brain is not programmed for risk. It is programmed to keep us alive, safe, within known limits, and that is why it associates stagnation with protection, as if the absence of movement were a guarantee of not suffering. But the soul has other plans. It did not come here to survive. It came to awaken, to grow, to serve, and to expand. Waiting is comfortable because it doesn't require confrontation, but it also doesn't allow for transformation. The pain of not acting is silent. It disguises itself as responsibility, perfectionism, and the search for more knowledge. But behind all of this, there is a harsh truth, the fear of truly seeing yourself, the fear of launching yourself into the unknown and not finding your footing. But that is exactly where freedom lies. As Napoleon Hill said, it is in definite action with a definite purpose that real creation begins, not in excessive thinking, not in endless analysis, but in the step you take before you feel ready. Andrew Carnegie said that fortune favors those who begin before their preparation is complete, because he knew what many still resist accepting, that courage is not born of security. It is born of commitment to something greater than fear itself. And that is the invitation of this video. It is not a video about rushing. It is not a video about productivity. It is a call to conscience, a reconnection with your divine capacity to act with soul and not with anxiety. Here, we will delve into the emotional backstage of waiting. Let's understand why wishing too hard can be pushing your dreams away. Let's unmask the illusion of infinite learning and the perfectionism that paralyzes. And above all, let's open the door to a new state of being, one that no longer waits for permission or signs, one that recognizes that it is already ready, simply because it has decided to be. This video is a map to escape spiritual and material stagnation, a path based on neuroscience, vibrational purpose, and the eternal wisdom of minds like Napoleon Hill, Neville Goddard, and nature itself, which silently teaches us what it means to act without anxiety. Get ready to rediscover your movement, because waiting is not neutrality. Waiting is choosing the same result over and over again. And you already know, life only begins when you begin. The invisible mistake of those who wait for the right moment. Sometimes waiting seems like wisdom, as if postponing a decision were a sign of maturity, preparation, and care. But that is not always the case. Often, it is an escape, a subtle, elegant, socially accepted escape. An escape with the name of responsibility. And the most dangerous thing is that it does not shout. It whispers. It convinces us that it is not the right time, that we need one more reading, one more confirmation, one more course, one more push. This is the blind spot of many souls seeking expansion. They believe they are just being cautious, when in fact, they are being controlled by the invisible fear of rejection, exposure, and failure. The limbic system, which takes care of the most primitive emotions, acts as a guardian of the known. It activates logical excuses that sound convincing. I am not ready yet. I need to understand better. I will wait for the right sign. And without realizing it, this logic turns the soul into a prisoner of its own care. There is a silent syndrome called almost ready. It is the emotional state of those who walk eternally in the corridor of preparation, but never cross the threshold of surrender. Those who live in this state specialize in internal arguments, mental justifications for inaction. But the body knows, the intuition feels, the heart tightens, Because inside us, something screams, "I should have started already." Spiritual procrastination is one of the most sophisticated forms of self-sabotage because it disguises itself as evolution. It hides behind rituals, studies, planning, perfectionism. But deep down, it only reveals a soul that has not allowed itself to be vulnerable enough to act. Waiting for the right moment is often a way of avoiding the real moment. And the more we wait, the further we distance ourselves from the vibration of fulfillment. Life does not happen when we are ready. It happens when we are present, when we decide to be a channel, even without guarantee of success. When we say yes to the soul, even when we are afraid. When we feel that we do not have everything, but still move forward with what we have. The right moment is not a cosmic event. It is an internal state, and you can already access it. Because the real mistake is not in trying and failing. It is in not trying and getting used to it. Why intense desire can distance you from what you want. Desire is natural. It is part of the human soul to dream, aspire, and want more. But there is an invisible line between healthy desire and vibrational attachment. And that is where many people get lost without realizing it. The more they desire, the more they feel they do not have it. The more they chase after it, the more the dream seems to slip away. And this is no coincidence. It is energy. It is frequency. It is vibration. There is a silent emotion that accompanies excessive desire, lack. Intense desire, when not balanced, is born from the feeling of lack. And every time we vibrate in lack, we reinforce to the universe that we are not ready to receive, not because we are incapable, but because of vibrational incompatibility. The energy of need screams scarcity, and the quantum field responds with more of what resonates. Absence, not presence. Far away, not close. Waiting, not fulfillment. It is like the emotional Doppler effect. The more you desperately chase something, the more that something seems to move away. Not because it is running away, but because your intense energy of seeking signals to the field that you do not yet feel one with what you want. There is a subtle but powerful difference between wanting and being vibrationally ready. Wanting says, "I need." Being ready says, "I already am." Most people do not understand that the universe does not respond to desire itself. It responds to your vibration. It is not about how much you want it. It is about how compatible you have become with what you desire. When wanting is greater than feeling, you create tension. And this tension impedes the flow. Manifestation does not happen when you scream for it. It happens when you are silent in the certainty that you are already worthy, already capable, already sufficient. This is why many pray with faith, but do not receive. They meditate with focus, but do not access. They work hard, but do not achieve, because they vibrate in absence. Even when they are in action, the soul needs to learn to desire with surrender, to desire with confidence, to desire as someone who is already living, not as someone who is begging. Pure desire has power. Anxious desire has a noise. Change happens when you stop running after it and start walking as someone who already carries it, as someone who already feels it, as someone who already is. Because in the end, true manifestation is not an achievement. It is a vibrational recognition. It is not about attracting. It is about tuning in. And the more you align yourself with the vibration of what you desire, the more natural it becomes to experience what previously seemed distant. The illusion of eternal learning, when studying becomes an escape. There comes a time when the desire to learn stops being an expansion and becomes a distraction. And this happens when we use knowledge as an anesthetic for the pain of taking action. When each new book, each new technique, each new course becomes a spiritual excuse for not facing what really needs to be done. At this point, knowledge becomes a shield, an elegant, intellectual shield that protects, but also imprisons. Many people walk the path of self-knowledge, carrying internal libraries. They know by heart the laws of the universe, the practices of the subconscious mind, the teachings of ancient masters. But still, they do not move. Still, they do not manifest. Still, they feel blocked. Because excess theory without real action creates analytical paralysis. It is like being faced with a sea of possibilities, but without the courage to dive in. The fear of the unknown hides behind the search for more preparation. And the more you study, the more distant fulfillment seems. Napoleon Hill was clear: knowledge is only powerful when applied. Until then, it is just unawakened potential. And as noble as studying is, there comes a point at which it becomes an escape from exposure, an escape from judgment, an escape from error, but most importantly, an escape from oneself, because taking action requires confrontation, and many prefer the comfort zone of theory to the vulnerability of doing. This illusion of eternal learning feeds a deceptive sense of evolution. The person feels that they are advancing, when in fact they are going around in circles. They are busy, but not connected. They are informed, but not transformed. They are full of ideas, but empty of experiences. And this generates a subtle pain, that of feeling prepared, but stagnant, that of knowing everything, but experiencing almost nothing. It is necessary to recognize when study has stopped being a seed and has become a prison, when the search for answers has become resistance to action, when the spiritual has become intellectual. Because true knowledge is not measured by the amount of information stored, but by the ability to transform life into presence, words into practice, faith in movement. The soul did not come here to be an encyclopedia. It came to be a channel of expression, of change, of creation. And this only happens when knowledge meets the present, when what you have learned breathes into what you live, when you decide that you already know enough to take the next step. Because, in the end, it is not the lack of knowledge that paralyzes, it is the lack of decision. And the decision does not come after studying. It comes when you stop running away from what you already know. How the anxiety of having to get things right blocks your manifestation. There is a silent pressure that many carry in their chest, the feeling that they need to get it right, that they cannot fail, that each step needs to be perfect, calculated, guaranteed. And behind this demand, there is a deep fear of making mistakes, a fear so old that it disguises itself as responsibility, but which, in reality, is a saboteur of the frequency of manifestation. Perfectionism is not a virtue. It is an emotional defense. It is a way of protecting oneself from the pain of being judged, rejected, discredited. Those who always seek to do everything right are often just trying to avoid the suffering of not being enough. But in this search for absolute control, the flow is lost, the energy is blocked, the body contracts, the spirit disconnects, because the soul does not express itself in rigidity. It reveals itself in the imperfect, in the courageous, in the present. The anxiety of getting things right generates a toxic expectation, a constant demand that wears down the mind and depletes the energy field. Every decision becomes a battlefield, every attempt a test of worth. And when the result doesn't come, the body feels it. Dopamine, which should be an ally in motivation, becomes an agent of frustration. Neuroscience explains, when the brain doesn't find a reward in the expected time, it becomes exhausted, and the energy is dispersed. This is the root of many blocked manifestations. It's not a lack of effort, it's excess control. It's a vibrational system where everything needs to go right, otherwise the identity collapses. But the universe doesn't respond to tension, it responds to coherence. And coherence is not perfection. It's alignment between our intention and action, between dream and surrender, between desire and presence. You don't have to get everything right. You have to allow yourself to learn from the process. You have to accept that failure is part of the movement, that making mistakes is a gateway to realignment, and that often it's in mistakes that the soul finds its strength. Manifestation doesn't happen when you master the path. It happens when you surrender to the path with truth. When you choose to be whole, even if incomplete. Letting go of the obsession with getting things right is one of the most profound acts of self-love, because it frees the spirit to experiment. It frees the mind to create. It frees the body to act. And it is in this state of freedom that life responds. Because when you no longer need to get things right to feel worthy, you have already become worthy. And it is this vibration that manifests. Mental model to get out of the waiting state. Irrational decision with a higher purpose. There comes a time when overthinking becomes a prison. A time when overplanning becomes paralysis. And that is when the only possible path is to take a leap. Not the reckless leap, driven by haste or escape, but the sacred leap, driven by the awareness that waiting any longer means continuing to lose life. That is where the mental model of irrational decision with a higher purpose is born. This model is simple, but profoundly transformative. It is based on the principle that at certain moments in life, logic needs to be interrupted. The rational mind needs to be challenged, because it has already created all the excuses. It has already listed all the risks. It has already reviewed all the scenarios. And still you have not moved. This means that the mind, in that state, is no longer serving the soul. It is serving fear. And that is why the decision needs to come from somewhere else. It needs to be born from the heart, from intuition, from the most intimate truth. Even if it seems irrational, even if there are no guarantees, the idea of taking a leap without a net is scary, but it also reveals a deep commitment. When you commit to something irreversibly, your energy field changes. Your mind starts looking for solutions, not excuses. Your body organizes itself towards movement. Your vibration sends a new signal to the universe. And this signal says, I am ready. Not because everything is perfect, but because I have decided that it is time. A powerful way to begin this transformation is what we call the awakening contract. A conscious decision to act within 72 hours, even without having everything resolved. This small window of time deactivates the cycle of spiritual procrastination. It activates the internal command that now is the time. Not tomorrow, not when everything makes sense, but now with what you have, with what you are, with what you vibrate. In this process, micro-victories become essential. They are not great external achievements. They are small acts of internal coherence. It is getting up and doing what you were avoiding. It is sending that message. It is starting that project. It is choosing action instead of waiting. Because each micro-victory is a vibrational message. You are back in control. You are present. You are available. Acting with a higher purpose does not mean acting in a hurry. It means acting consciously, with alignment, with truth. And even if it seems irrational to the world, it will always be rational to the soul, because the soul recognizes when a decision comes from the essence. And at that moment, the result does not matter. What matters is the reconnection with your own movement. The decision is not the end, it is the beginning. And every beginning carries a force that no logic is capable of containing. Manifestation is not about believing, it is about becoming compatible. There is a widespread belief in the spiritual world that says that everything starts with believing. Believing in the dream, believing in the universe, believing in yourself. But believing alone does not create reality, because believing can still contain doubt. It can still inhabit the mind without touching the body, without becoming presence, without becoming frequency. True manifestation does not happen when you just believe. It happens when you become compatible with what you desire. Vibrational compatibility is the heart of conscious creation. It is when your energetic identity aligns with the reality you want to live. It is no longer a question of effort. It is a question of coherence. What you seek outside needs to find a reflection within. And this reflection is not born from empty statements. It is born from the deep decision to be, to inhabit the vibration of what you want, even before seeing it. This is why many people, even with faith, remain blocked, because they try to manifest from an old self, a self that still doubts, that still feels small, that still vibrates with need. And the quantum field does not respond to words. It responds to frequency. It does not respond to loose intention. It responds to the identity you sustain when no one is looking, when you are silent. when your vibration speaks louder than your speech. Neville Goddard said, "Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, but this is only possible when you allow your consciousness to merge with the new self. It is not enough to imagine what you want. You need to embody who lives it. Feel it in your body. Breathe as if it were real. Walk as if it were already happening, not as an illusion, but as alignment, because the universe does not respond to your request. It responds to your frequency. Being compatible is more than believing. It is living as someone who already recognizes the path. It is making decisions that reflect the new state. It is moving away from old patterns, even if it still hurts. It is courageously choosing what was once just theory. Manifesting is not attracting. It is allowing what is already possible to find space in you. And this only happens when you stop asking and start being. This change is subtle, but profound. It is the transition from begging to deserving, from trying to becoming, from waiting to expressing. And when this shift happens, everything changes. Because the external world can only reflect what you already carry in the invisible. And in this new state of compatibility, time ceases to be an enemy. Waiting dissolves, because you have already entered the vibration of what you seek. And this is what transforms desire into reality. True story, the man who gave up 3 feet from the gold. Amid the silence of the Colorado mines, a man dug with dedication, day after day, in search of gold. He had bought the land with hope, with vision, with desire, and for a while, everything seemed promising. But as the days passed and the results did not appear, his spirit began to fade. Doubts infiltrated his heart like fine dust, until one day he stopped. He sold all his equipment and gave up. The new owner, with the help of an experienced engineer, discovered that the gold vein was there, just 3 feet from where the other had stopped. This story, told by Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich, is not about mining. It is about frequency, about the blind spot that appears when the result does not come in the time the mind expects, about the illusion that nothing is happening when everything is about to emerge. Because many times, manifestation does not fail. What fails is vibrational persistence. Belief gives way, emotion cools, vision disperses, and just when reality was about to collapse, energy withdraws. There is an invisible turning point in the process of creation, a point at which everything seems to stand still, but in fact, it is in full reorganization. The matter has not yet moved, but the energy is already in motion. And it is at this exact point that many give up, because they trust appearances more than vibration, because they listen to their fears more than their intuition, because they believe that the absence of proof is the absence of possibility. But the field does not respond in a linear way. It responds with lapses, with accumulations, with ruptures, and what seemed distant can become present in an instant. This metaphor of lost gold is a mirror for those who live cycles of almost succeeded, almost believed, almost sustained. But the almost, no matter how close it seems, is still absence. Because it is not enough to start, it is necessary to sustain. Sustain the field, sustain the focus, sustain the confidence, even without evidence, especially without evidence. Because that is where the invisible begins to take shape, and the invisible only reveals itself to those who do not give up on it. This story is a vibrational reminder, an ancestral memory, that the soul knows the way, but it is the mind that needs to relearn how to trust. And when faith finds constancy, what seemed impossible becomes inevitable. The gold, in the end, is not in the earth. It is in your ability to keep going, even when everything seems silent. Because it is in silence that manifestation prepares to speak. And only those who remain listen. The paradox of waiting. The longer you wait, the more you deprogram yourself to fail. The human mind gets used to everything, to comfort, to pain, to absence. And perhaps without realizing it, many have become accustomed to waiting. Waiting for a sign, waiting for the right moment, waiting for an external force to push them forward. But prolonged waiting, when it becomes an internal state, is not neutral. It is programming. It shapes the brain. It structures the identity. It silently reinforces the idea that something is always missing. On a neurological level, this habit of postponing creates fixed pathways. The brain begins to associate waiting with security. It begins to build patterns where later becomes more comfortable than now. And this turns into a subtle cycle of self-sabotage. Because every time you postpone an impulse from your soul, you reinforce an unconscious belief that it is not yet the time. And this belief becomes the basis of your frequency, of your energetic signature, and everything around you responds to it. Brain plasticity explains how these patterns are built. The repetition of thoughts and behaviors strengthens neural connections, and the longer you live in waiting, the more your brain understands that this is the safe zone. This creates negative reinforcement. Every non-action, every postponed decision becomes another brick in the construction of an identity that fears movement. And over time, what was just a postponement becomes a vibrational identity. The identity of someone who never starts. But there is something even deeper. Waiting deprograms the soul from its creative nature, because the essence of the spirit is action in expansion. It is energy in flow. And when you choose not to move, even when you hear the inner call, you do not just postpone a result. You silence your own soul. You teach yourself that you cannot trust your creative impulse. And this is what hurts the most. Not what was not achieved, but what was not attempted. Energy does not flow toward the state of doubt. It flows toward the state of presence. And presence requires movement, not an external agitated movement, but an internal gesture of commitment, of positioning, of response. Waiting may seem harmless, but the more you wait, the more you train yourself to fail, not for lack of ability, but for excessive distance from your own essence. The transformation begins when you realize that you are not standing still. You are being programmed, and with each day of inaction, you are becoming more compatible with that which you do not want. But the opposite is also true. With each act of courage, with each step, however small, you deprogram the fear. You rewrite the pattern, and you reconnect the brain, body and spirit to their natural state, that of living manifestation, that of presence that creates, that of consciousness that acts. How to activate the state of aligned action on 3 levels: mental, emotional, and spiritual. Not every action generates transformation. Not every movement is a sign of progress. The soul does not respond to empty doing. It awakens in doing with presence, in acting with awareness. And this acting, to be truly powerful, needs to be aligned on 3 levels: mind, emotion, and spirit. When these centers connect, a state is born that is not only productive, it is sacred. On the mental level, everything begins with clarity, not a rigid clarity of unattainable goals, but an intimate, silent, almost intuitive vision of why you move. The mind needs to understand the purpose, even if it does not yet see the complete path. When the mind grasps the direction, it organizes thoughts, reduces noise, filters distractions. It is like aligning the internal compass before the journey. And without this compass, any path seems right, or any obstacle seems like the end. On the emotional level, the key is acceptance, feeling without fighting what you feel, embracing fears, fatigue, doubts, but not clinging to them. Emotion, when repressed, blocks vital energy. When embraced, it becomes fuel. When you allow your feelings to breathe, they become a guide, not a prison. Acting with denied emotions is like walking with stones on your chest, but acting with integrated emotions is walking with roots and wings. On the spiritual plane, the decision is born, but not a rational decision. It is a choice of the soul, a silent yes that breaks old contracts with stagnation, a response to the inner call to get moving. This level is the most subtle, but the most powerful, because when the spirit decides, the rest aligns. The body follows, the mind supports, emotion collaborates, the vibration changes. To activate this state of coherence, small rituals can be more effective than big plans. A morning activation ritual inspired by Napoleon Hill's philosophy and the discoveries of neuroplasticity can awaken this alignment. Conscious silence, present breathing, repetition of short mantras that reprogram the field, and an act of presence that materializes the intention. This is not magic. It is spiritual neurology. It is applied vibration. It is faith translated into gesture. The body is the first to manifest. It feels before the world responds. It vibrates before reality changes. That is why the body also needs to be included in this process. Conscious movement, attentive breathing, embodied presence, because there is no manifestation without embodiment. And there is no true action without total presence. Acting with mind, emotion, and spirit aligned is not about intensity. It is about truth. It is about doing something that does not tire, because it does not fight with the soul. Doing something that does not disperse, because it is born from integration. And this state is accessible. It is available. It does not require strength. It requires listening, deep listening, present listening, listening to what already wants to be born through you. Because when the three centers unite, action ceases to be an attempt, and it becomes an expression. What nature teaches about action without anxiety. Nature is in no hurry, and yet everything happens. The sea does not rush to become a tree. The river does not worry about reaching the sea. The flower does not demand that it bloom at the right time. There is a silent wisdom in the natural rhythm of things, a vibrational intelligence that understands that action is not synonymous with agitation. That movement does not need urgency, and that true progress happens at the exact time it should happen. The Chinese bamboo is one of the greatest examples of this truth. For years, it grows downwards, silently, invisibly. Its roots go deep without anything being seen on the surface. And then, suddenly, it grows meters in a few days. Not because something magical happened, but because the invisible was being prepared, because the foundation was being formed, because the invisible was supporting the visible. This is the essence of active patience. Active patience is not passive waiting. It is deep presence. It is the state of someone who acts with faith, without anxiety about results, of someone who plants, knowing that the harvest will come, but without demanding from the ground a time that it cannot rush. For those who move because they feel an inner call, not because they need to prove something external. And in this state, time stops being an enemy. It becomes an ally. It becomes an extension of the process. The problem is that many confuse movement with desperation. They run without direction. They act without connection. And at the end of the day, they are exhausted, but not transformed, because they acted out of fear and not out of listening. And nature reminds us, the movement that transforms is not the one that wastes energy, but the one that expresses truth, the one that is born of alignment, the one that carries intention and not just repetition. Divine time only flows for those who are in movement, but this movement does not need to be noisy. It can be internal. It can be subtle. It can be the silent decision to trust. It can be the daily choice to continue, even without applause, even without immediate results, because those who act coherently, even slowly, are always closer than those who run in disarray. Nature teaches, with its stillness, that haste is noise, that anxiety is distraction, and that the soul flourishes when doing is at peace with being, when the step respects the internal rhythm, when desire does not trample wisdom. Acting, then, is not haste. It is presence. It is alignment with the flow of life that, like the river, always finds the sea, even without knowing how, even without forcing anything. Just being what you are. Just following. Just trusting. Life does not respond to requests. It responds to vibrational decisions. Waiting seems safe, but it is often what distances us from the reality we silently ask for. The soul does not grow in passive waiting. It flourishes in the commitment to movement. Every moment of hesitation is a lost invitation to synchronicity, and every gesture of courage, however small, is an opening to portals that only reveal themselves to those who walk. Waiting is comfortable, but it is also a risk, Because while you wait, your frequency settles, your energy cools, your faith is diluted. What was once an intense desire turns into a weak memory. The soul forgets what it was like to vibrate for something that made sense. The wait that should have been just an interval becomes a home. And there, little by little, you stop being a channel. You become a spectator of your own life, of your own strength, of your own creation. Nothing changes from the outside in. Transformation begins with self-image, with the way you see yourself when you close your eyes, with what you believe you are worthy of receiving. Life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you believe you deserve. And this deserving is not rational. It is energetic. It is in the gestures you repeat, in the decisions you make, in the energy you emanate, even without realizing it. W. Clement Stone said that positive thinking only has power when it drives action with faith. And this is the key that closes the cycle of everything we've talked about here. It's not enough to think. It's not enough to visualize. You need to move with faith. Not blind faith, but living faith. A faith that breathes in actions, that manifests itself in details, that says yes to what you can't yet see but already feel. Everything you desire already exists at some level of reality, but it is not accessible while you keep waiting. It is available to those who become a channel, to those who vibrate at the frequency of decision, to those who choose to no longer postpone, but to live. With fear, perhaps, with doubts, perhaps, but with soul. And that is what the universe recognizes. Not your certainty, but your surrender. You don't need permission. You need a beginning. And the beginning is not somewhere else. It is in the now, in the silent yes that you offer to the flow, in the choice to no longer be absent from yourself, to no longer live the life that fits, but the life that pulsates, that calls, that transforms. And this life begins when you stop waiting and begin to live as someone who has already understood that the time of the soul is now.